Hello there. So let me begin by saying what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that the Sethite theory is a heresy because I disagree with it as an interpretation or because I just think it is wrong. There's plenty of interpretations that I would disagree with, plenty of things I think that are wrong. I would never call them heresies. I'm simply not that egotistical. I don't think disagreeing with me is any great sin or crime. This, however, the Sethite theory, I believe is a heresy because it both does violence to the text of the Bible and undermines the work of Christ on the cross. Now, you may be wondering, what is the Sethite theory, Jason? Why are we even having this conversation? What is this all about? Well, let's start at the beginning. So, Genesis 6, the 4 verses that have created so much controversy over the last few years, has two main conversations about it. One is that the event is describing a time when angels, which the Book of Enoch will refer to as watchers, they get that from Daniel, but that these angelic beings come down, marry human women, have offspring that become giants. And there are a lot of people who disagree with that interpretation. Julius Africanus and St. Augustine are Christian theologians from way back, and they disagreed with that interpretation, and they were sort of the ones that heralded what has become to be known as the Sethite Theory. That what's actually happening here is that the children of Seth, the righteous children of Seth, are basically leaders that were deceived by the offspring and daughters of Cain. That essentially, like Salome dancing before Herod, corrupted these leaders and took them from godly leaders back to these tyrants. And so that's basically the Sethite theory. But let me go ahead and actually read you the 4 verses that all of this is about, and then we'll argue why I disagree with it. Not just disagree, but why this is a heresy. So Genesis 6, 1 through 4. When man began to multiply in the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So, the question here is, who are the sons of God? Who are the daughters of men, or daughters of man? And then, who are the Nephilim? So, the problem is, the word Nephilim itself is ambiguous. The majority of scholars working today like to think that the word Nephilim means the fallen ones, but I highly recommend Heiser's work on this. I'll have a description to this, I'll have a link in the description below. That the Nephilim actually does mean giant. That essentially it's an Akkadian loan word, and that the pluralization actually means giants. That the Septuagint was correct when they translated Nephilim and Rephaim as giants. That will be in a following episode. We're going to deal with all that. So, the thing is, people can say, well, maybe Nephilim means giant, but it doesn't mean they have to be literally tall, powerful people. They could just mean giant in the metaphorical sense, right? Like we talk about people who are giants in this industry today. Same thing. After these were mighty men, men of renown, these were just politically powerful people who were corrupted. So you would then ask, okay, so what is your support for this theory? Why is the plain reading of the text incorrect? And generally you get 2 points that are made, exclusively these 2 points. The first is they will say, well, Luke 20:34 through 36 says that angels can't have children. And let me quote it real quick for those who are listening. And Jesus said to them, "The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage, but those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die any more, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection." So, right there, it's saying, see, angels don't marry because they don't die. Therefore, they can't have children. Case closed. Also, it says that people in the resurrection, you become like the sons of God. And in Galatians, right, 3:26 says, "For in Christ Jesus you are all sons of God through faith." Romans 8:16, "The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God." John 1:12, "But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God." So right there, angels can have kids, and the righteous God followers can be called sons of God. Sethite theory proven. These weren't angels that were having children with human women. These were simply good, godly men who were corrupted by the daughters of Cain, and the Nephilim were just tyrants on the earth, and that's it. Case closed. Well, since I'm calling it a heresy, and the first thing I point out is it does violence to the text, let's prove that it does violence to the text. You'll note that they use Luke 20:34 through 36, but they do not use the parallel verse in Matthew. Matthew 22:30 says, which is a parallel verse. If you don't know what a parallel verse is, maybe you're new to Christianity or you aren't a Christian. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called the Synoptic Gospels. They basically are telling the same story. They have a lot of overlap. So there are certain events or things that Jesus said that are paralleled in multiple books. And so that's what this is. So the parallel to Luke is Matthew 22:30, "For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels in heaven." In heaven. Why would Matthew record that little additional piece? Why Luke doesn't is irrelevant. But why put that in there? Why in heaven? Unless there's angelic beings that aren't in heaven. Peter, the guy whose name got changed by Christ, the guy who Jesus seemed to like an awful lot, he wrote about something interesting twice in some of his letters. 1 Peter 3:18 through 20 says, "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through water." Okay, so he's connecting these spirits that were in prison, that Jesus, when upon his death, goes into Sheol. And by the way, the proclaim here, I think I like proclaimed. This is the ESV, I think. Traditionally, you see that translated as preached. Sort of, a lot of people have thought, well, is he preaching to them to try and get some kind of repentance out of them? No, this is proclaiming his power over them. But he's connecting these spirits in prison, the ones not in heaven, with Noah. Okay, that should make us think back to Genesis 6, right? What happens in Genesis 6? The flood. Now, what does Peter talk about in 2 Peter 2, verses 4 through 6? "For if God did not spare the angels," much more direct, "when they sinned," we've got angels sinning, "but cast them into hell." By the way, that phrase there is tartaru, meaning to be thrown into Tartarus. We're going to talk about that in the next episode. Just keep that in mind. and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until judgment. If he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. Okay, so now, in 1 Peter, it's the spirits, chains, all that. Now we have angels sinning in the time of Noah, and he's connecting them with Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, this is very clearly Genesis 6. He is saying that these angels sinned, sexually sinned. He's connecting those concepts, and he's saying that there is a sexual sin involved. Lastly, we have Jude, the literal brother of Jesus. By the way, if you're wondering why it says just Jude 6 and 7, not chapter and verse, Jude's 1 chapter long. He was very precise with his language. Jude 6 through 7. And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day, just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities were, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire, serve as an example by undergoing punishment of eternal fire. Likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire. Okay, Peter and Jude, 2 people who knew Jesus very, very well, are telling us that Genesis 6 is about angels. That the sons of God right here are angels. That's pretty clear. It is connecting angels. Sexual immorality. That only occurs once. Let me rephrase this. That's only listed to have occurred once. Genesis 6. So, okay, so now that we've proven that clearly, I know people are saying, who are in the know, are like, well, why aren't you talking about the book of Enoch? We'll save that for later. We're making an argument here about heresy. I'm not going to point to a non-canonical book. We'll talk more about the book of Enoch later, don't worry. So, clearly, Peter and Jude think Genesis 6 is about angels having kids, that these Nephilim are the kids. You could make an argument, there are some who have tried that said that the Nephilim themselves are actually the angels. Again, we will talk about that in the next episode, but at the very least, we are addressing the Sethite theory. Now, the question needs to go a little bit further. Sons of God, B'nai Ha-Elohim. It occurs 6 times in the Bible. Like this phrase, B'nai Ha-Elohim, only occurs 6 times in the Hebrew Bible. If you're going to say that the time in Genesis 6, the twice in Genesis 6 that it occurs, are talking about humans, then we have to address the other times it's mentioned. We have Job 1:6. Now when there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. Well, clearly the sons of God, they are angels. Job 2:1. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. Also clearly angels again. Well, maybe Job 38:7 is going to use the phrase sons of God to mean humans. Let me read it. When the morning stars sang together and the sons of God shouted for joy. This is about the creation of the earth before humans were even made. So clearly angels. Well, Deuteronomy 32:8. That actually occurs within the Torah, the first 5 books, the Pentateuch. Maybe since it's the same, roughly the same kind of, it's the same author, depending on your interpretation of it, is irrelevant. It's the same group of text. maybe it's going to use, Deuteronomy 32 is going to use sons of God in what is clearly a reference to humanity. When the Most High, that would be God, gave to the nations their inheritance, this is what happens at the Tower of Babel. When he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Gosh darn it, those are also angels. Again, prior episode we talked about this. This is the divorce of man and the nations being given spirits. Heiser again. There's a link in that description. I'll let you have it. Okay, so in order for sons of God to mean human beings, the children of Seth, we have to basically disregard every time that phrase is used in the Old Testament. That's a bad idea. That's not a good hermeneutic. We also have to say, well, hold on. We can't say that angels can't have kids because there's no verse saying that. Because let's go back to even Luke here, right? The Luke verse here doesn't say they can't have children. It just says that angels aren't married. They don't marry. And of course, Matthew, the parallel verse on this says, well, it's because the ones who are in heaven don't. Yeah, the angels that are in heaven, they don't marry. But maybe some of them did. 1st, 2nd Peter, and Jude both allude to the fact that some clearly did. They're reinforcing this story here in Genesis 6, 1 through 4. But what about the other aspect of this, right? What about sons of God being used for, righteous people? After all, we have it right here, right? That Luke is even right here saying, right, that when you're in the resurrection, sons of God, that we're like them. Galatians, we're all sons of God. Romans, we're children of God. John 1:12, that we become children of God. We can become children of God. Therefore, maybe there's something else going on, but we can become children of God. There's no reason to think that children of God in this one context couldn't also mean righteous people. Yeah. But this would be my other point. This is where the heresy really kicks in on this one. The reason New Testament saints are called sons of God is because of what Jesus did on the cross. We are now able to be called sons of God because he is the Son of God. He's the firstborn of the resurrection. It's his death, burial, and resurrection, and then ascension that allows us to be called sons of God now. This is where Paul gets his theology when he says, don't you know that we will judge the angels? Where's Paul getting that? He's not making it up out of nothing. He is seeing what Jesus is saying here and saying, we're something entirely new. The Holy Spirit's dwelling in us. We are now sons. We are children of God. We are now part of the heavenly family. We're not friends. We're not servants per se. We are now family. That's a huge theological change. That didn't occur in the Old Testament. That's a New Testament concept. So to say that way back here in Genesis 6, that sons of God could mean the righteous, then Jesus didn't have to come because there was already an alternative for us to become sons of God. There's your heresy. So not only do we have to use a bad hermeneutic, meaning we look at all of the times that this phrase is used, and it's always an angelic being of some kind, and say, well, except for the first time it's used. By the way, law of first use, look that one up. But then you have to undermine the work of Christ himself in order to really make that argument hold water. Bad idea. Additionally, going back to the idea of doing violence to the text, the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, is contrasted, right? Because it's the sons of God, but the daughters of man. And I've been Texan, I've never pronounced anything correctly in my life. The Benet Ha-Adam. If you look it up, it's usually bat, because I think that's the root word, which means daughter. But it's daughters of man. So what we have here is the author is contrasting divinity and dirt. Because Adam means man. So it's literally saying the daughters of Adam versus the sons of God. The author could have easily said, the children of Seth and the daughters of Cain. There would have been no problem writing that out. The author here is making a very, very clear point, right? Wrong one. It's divinity, Elohim, Adam, dirt. Now, this is where people would say, but hold on. Isn't Adam a son of God in Luke 3:8? He absolutely is. Luke does call him a son of God. So doesn't that just undermine everything that I've just said? No. It actually supports what I just said. In the Old Testament, son of is telling you what you are, right? The sons of God are on that side. They are Elohim. They are divine. They're children of divine. They are directly made by God. We are sons of Adam. Adam was directly made by God. We're Adam's children. We are man. We are mankind. We are sons of Adam. Adam was a son of God because he was directly made by God. We're not. Right? I'm assuming everyone who's watched this has had that conversation about the birds and the bees. If you haven't, ask your parents. And if you're watching this, you don't know what the birds and bees are, then you've got bigger problems. So, Genesis 6 is saying definitively something really weird happened. Let me pull it up again. It is saying that early on, prior to the flood, and again, Genesis 6 is the flood chapter. It's saying early on, there was a time when the sons of God, the B'nai Ha-Elohim, saw the daughters of man specifically, not daughters of men, daughters of man, the Benet Ha-Adam, saw they were attractive, took them as wives, had children called the Nephilim. These Nephilim were mighty men of renown. We're going to talk about them next time. But this happened. These weren't children of Seth, hanging out with daughters of Cain. These weren't some wonderful leaders who were twisted and turned by some lot lizards who turned them into tyrants. It's not what happened. These were angels. Got freaky. Did some things they weren't supposed to do. We'll talk about that next week. But that's what it is. That's where we are. And again, the Sethite Theory is, in order to make your argument, you have to use a very poor hermeneutic to change the idea of the sons of God, meaning angelic beings, to being righteous men. You have to have a very bad hermeneutic to do that. You have to cherry pick. Cherry picking is literally the best thing you can say about it. But in order to cherry pick your verses, you then have to completely undermine the work of Christ on the cross. And that, my friends, well, That's heresy.